Hello everyone, thanks for joining us here on Horizon. I'm Rob McClendon. Well, if you are on a New Year's diet, don't feel alone. So state government. Lawmakers are looking for ways to save money to plug a budget hole that looks to be more than $900 million. And that belt tightening may pinch a little or a lot depending upon who you are. Today, we begin an ongoing look at the impact budget woes at the state capitol could have on state services. Here's our Blaine Singletary.
You don't have to follow state news very long to realize Oklahoma's budget hasn't been in the best of sorts lately. And as many of us welcomed in the new calendar year and celebrated the holidays, things got even worse. On December 23rd, Oklahoma Finance Secretary Preston Dorflinger declared a revenue failure. This means tax collections to the General Revenue Fund have fallen well below their original estimates. In this case, 7.7% short.
Almost every major tax category is in decline because of our biggest industry is in decline.
And that's bad news for anyone who gets monthly allocations from that fund, especially government agencies.
Beginning in January, each agency that receives monthly general revenue allocations will see a reduction of those allocations.
State agencies have been dealing with funding cuts for years, and this only stretches the lines thinner, with an additional $176.9 million in cuts across the board. And that could be an even larger number when the legislature convenes.
I think it's likely the legislature will do something along those lines because, frankly, I see the situation worsening by the time they're back in February.
Dorflinger has set the base cut rate at 3%, but because this cut is proportional to the total amount of money an agency receives, some agencies will be affected more than others. Agencies like the Department of Juvenile Affairs, who are fully funded by the GRF, will take out the full 3%, while others who don't get any funding from it, like the Department of Environmental Quality, will not see a change to their bottom line. So, how did we get here?
Make no mistake, the vast majority of the challenge we face ahead of us started at the OPEC building in Saudi Arabia, not at this building located at 2300 North Lincoln. Obviously, the oil price isn't getting better, and energy companies aren't going to be able to keep employment levels steady under this price.
In a state economy with a huge energy sector, if the rigs go down, so do most of the economic numbers. But Representative Scott Inman, Democratic Minority Leader, disagrees and says the problems do lie within the legislative chambers.
When you look at the actual numbers and the fact that our economy is growing, the state's doing relatively well, but yet we have fewer to spend in actual budgetary items, it has to lead to only one conclusion, and that's that the legislative leadership at the Capitol has sort of let the state down. Their fiscal mismanagement of the budget has caused us to be in a situation with economic growth, but yet budget cuts at the same time.
Taking a fundamental approach, Inman points to the numerous tax credits on the books as extra money the state could be adding to its coffers. Money the state needs more every day.
What you've seen, though, over the last several years is we basically have pitted core functions of government against each other. As they've layered on tax cuts and tax credits and budget numbers have reduced, instead of saying, you know what, we can have both, we can have good schools and good roads, you now created a situation where roads and schools are fighting each other over the last crumbs of a fiscal budget. That shouldn't happen in Oklahoma. We need both to move the state forward.
A treacherous road lies ahead for the state government, but Oklahoma has been through worse. This is the fifth revenue failure since 2000, and Preston Dorflinger says today's is by no means the deepest one.
In 2009, revenues were 17.9% off the estimate when revenue failure was declared. The cuts to agencies were 7.5% across the board. It certainly isn't easy, but it won't be as hard as it was the last time, at least not right now.
The reality of this situation is that budget shortfalls are nothing new. And with no clear end in sight, lawmakers and state agencies have few choices but to adapt to this economic climate.
We've got a long haul ahead of us, but we've known that for months. That's why we've been meeting about it for months. We need to look at all those structural budget challenges we've been talking about, and we need to move from talk to action.
Well, one suggestion to help fill the budget gap is for the state to allow some state agencies to operate without appropriations from the state. Jonathan Small is the president of the Oklahoma Council of Public Affairs and says it makes sense for agencies that generate their own revenue to pay their own way. The public policy group estimates this could save up to $20 million a year. Now, in his first term as insurance commissioner, John Doak pushed for his department to do just that, but fears by the legislature that they could lose control over a non-appropriated agency killed that proposal. Well, Oklahoma is certainly not alone when it comes to volatile revenue streams. Economic forecasting is a tricky business, especially for states whose economies are dependent on cyclical industries like energy. Now, if you'd like to learn more about how we got ourselves in such a pickle, I have a link to a very interesting article out of the Washington Post that explains it quite well. Just go to our website at okhorizon.com and look under this story. Now, when we return, we'll visit with Oklahoma's state treasurer, who has some very definitive ideas on not only how we got here, but how we can get out.